What's up guys, it's my J-Man here. Welcome to another video, and if you're new, welcome to the channel. In this video, as the title suggests, I'm going to be talking about some of the mistakes that are present in Need for Speed Unbound that should be fixed or changed in the next Need for Speed. Now, I will say that only a couple of the things in this video are actually mistakes that were made in the making of this game, but most of them are just small things that I have a problem with that could, and in my opinion, should be changed for the next game. Now, I'm not going to be suggesting adding anything drastically new or anything that would require a crazy overhaul in this video. More so just things that, if changed, could drastically improve the gameplay experience and the overall enjoyment of the game, at least in my opinion. This is going to be quite a long video, I will say, because I've got so much that I want to talk about, so get comfortable and enjoy the video. Alright, so first let's talk about the splitting of online and single player. This might be a bit of a hot take, but I actually do think this was a good idea, but the way they went about doing it was a mistake in my opinion. I want you to hear me out on this one, because I actually have a lot to say about it. So first of all, I can actually see why they did this. If you think back to Need for Speed Heat, because there was shared progression, it meant that you could go into an online lobby with a friend who's already further ahead than you. Let's say you've just started the game, for example, and they could constantly invite you to higher tier races where you can get paid more, allowing you to upgrade your car way above the required tier for the story races, and it would allow you to win every race effortlessly, especially since there was no rating cap for the races. My theory is that for Unbound, they split them so that the campaign would be more engaging and challenging for players, as you can't just go online, grind for a bit, upgrade your car, and then just go to a campaign and dominate every race as you could in Need for Speed Heat. And in my opinion, this was a good idea, as it meant the campaign would feel a bit more competitive and more of a challenge. The thing is though, if that was the case, this wouldn't have even been that necessary, because with the newly introduced tier system, which I'm a massive fan of, there's a maximum cap rating for each class. So if Unbound did have shared progression, it wouldn't be that much of an issue, and you could still have the same campaign experience like they intended. The only difference would be that you'd be able to upgrade your garage much quicker to get access to elite performance parts. Now, on to the reason why I think the way they went about it was a mistake. So, in the end of Volume 7 report, in response to a question about why the new content isn't available in single player, one of the devs stated that a choice was made early in the development of Unbound that single player and multiplayer would be separate, so the core architecture of the game listens and facilitates that rule. I feel like what this essentially means is that the single player is a standalone part of the game. And I think that this was a mistake because it meant that the single player wasn't able to be updated at all, which is why it didn't receive any of the new game modes like Drift Pro, Drag, and even Hot Pursuit. I do think it's a real shame, because I think some of those game modes, especially Drift Pro and Drag, would have been great additions to single player, especially for those who may not have access to the internet or a stable internet connection, or simply for those who prefer to play offline. Thankfully, in that same response, the dev also stated that whatever comes next for Need for Speed, all areas of the game will be updatable, so that's great to hear. Personally, I think in the next game, they should keep it as it was in Unbound, but of course, make it so that it can receive updates like they stated. That might be slightly controversial, but I actually like the idea of having to grind twice. It gives me more satisfaction when playing the game. Like, if we go down the shared progression route, you can easily just go online, get all your cars ready, and then cruise through the story mode. And to me, that is kind of boring. So yeah, I actually would keep it as it was in Unbound. Let me know in the comments if you disagree though, and why. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Okay, so on to the next point, which is about the car list, more specifically the inclusion of multiple variants of a car to flesh out the car list. What I mean by this is when they have the convertible, roadster, cabriolet or spider variant of a car. This has been a problem not just in Unbound, but since Need for Speed 2015, and it's gotten progressively worse. My biggest gripe with this is that it's just so pointless. Like, why not just have the main car and then add customization options to make it into that variant, rather than add a whole new car? I mean, they've done that with some of them anyway. For example, we've got the 458 and the 458 Spider, and if you go on to customize the 458 Spider, you can put the roof back on it, and it's basically the same as the regular 458. So what exactly was the point in adding it? And I think the most annoying part of it for me is that instead of adding these variants, they could have added some different cars from that same brand. I mean, if we look at the car list from launch, Unbound had 143 cars, with 16 of them being a convertible, Spider, a Roadster or a Cabriolet variant. Those 16 slots could have been filled up with completely new cars from that same brand. For example, instead of the 458 Spider, we could have had the 812 Superfast. Instead of the 570S Spider, we could have had the 720S or even the Senna, and the list just goes on. Anyway, I doubt they change up the car list that much for the next game, but I just love them to do away with having multiple variants of a car and instead add completely new cars. Of course, I know it's difficult with licensing and stuff, so that's why I mentioned cars from the same brand. You know, I wouldn't expect them to go out and grab Toyota, for example, as much as I'd love to see that happen. Right, so the next couple of things I want to talk about is the lack of availability of gearboxes on many cars, as well as the limited engine swaps on certain cars compared to others. First, let's talk about the gearboxes. Now, when I talk about lack of availability on certain cars, what I mean is that some gearboxes are available on some cars, but not others, and it just doesn't make any sense as to why. I think there are some cars in the game that could really benefit from having a 7 or an 8 speed gearbox, such as the Dodge Challenger SRT8 or the Camaro Z28, but they only have a 5 and a 6 speed available. Now personally, I think that every gearbox that's available in the game should be available on every single car, so you should be able to put anything from a 2 speed up to an 8 speed gearbox on any car of your choice. Yep, you heard that right, I did say 2 speed, and I want you to hear me out on this one before you start thinking, what the heck is this guy on about? Because I actually did a bit of research for this. Now, I can kind of see why they added a 2 and 3 speed gearbox for some of the older muscle cars, such as the 67 Camaro, because in real life, that car could actually come with a 2 or 3 speed gearbox. And if we look at the Dodge Challenger SRT8 that I mentioned earlier, that car actually did only come with a 5 or 6 speed. So from a realism aspect, they make sense. But if they really cared about realism, then why are there several supercars with 5 speed gearbox available? For example, the Huracan, the Pista, and the Huayra, which all only come with 7 speed gearboxes in real life. And there's many more examples. Now, my issue with this isn't anything to do with realism. It's that the lack of options for many cars just limits your creativity of a build. Like, if I want to put a 3 speed on my Nissan GTR, for example, I should have the option to do that. Now, whether that would actually be a good idea or not is a different story, but it's never a bad thing to give more options for players to experiment with. I am aware that there's a PC mod that gives all the cars that don't currently have 8 speed gearboxes available the ability to equip up to 8 gears. So that's pretty cool. However, that of course is only available for PC players and is most likely only for single player anyway. Speaking of giving players more options to experiment with, let's talk about the limited engine swaps on some cars. Now personally, I think engine swaps have been one of, if not the best addition to Need for Speed ever. They give you so much variety in terms of builds, and they allow you to experiment so much and get creative with different cars and builds. My issue with engine swaps isn't so much with engine swaps themselves, but the inconsistencies in the amount of engine swaps on each car. For example, the Mazda RX-7 has 12 engine swaps available for it, but both Mazda MX-5s only have 4 and 5 respectively. And even looking at something like the Aventador SV, that only has 3 engine swaps available for it. And I know what you might be thinking, well, it's a supercar, and that would be a valid point if there weren't supercars with much more than 3 engine swaps. For example, the Huracan and the Huayra both have 9 engine swaps each. And then you've got others like the McLaren 600 LT, which has 8, the Ford GT, and many more with at least 7, and even the Volvo 242 with 11. My point is, why the inconsistencies when it comes to engine swaps? Now, I'm about to suggest something that, in my opinion, shouldn't, but might be a bit of a hot take. So if you disagree with it, you know what to do. Take it to the comments. But if the next game contains engine swaps, I'd love to see every single engine in the game be available for every car in the game. Aside from the electric cars, of course. I think it would allow for so much variety, so much to experiment with, and the amount of creativity you could see with builds would be insane. The possibilities would be endless, and as someone who loves to experiment, this would be amazing. Now, I'm pretty sure there are mods available that actually do this if you play on PC, but again, that's only available for PC players, and it's most likely also only available as single player anyway. Whilst we're on the topic of engine swaps, I'd love them to bring back forged engine swaps. You know, sometimes I already like the sound of the stock engine, but I want to squeeze more power out of it, and that's where forged engine swaps would come in. We had a few in Need for Speed Heat, and I'd love it if they brought them back in the next game. Staying on the topic of performance for a minute, one thing I'd love to see in the next game is a completely open handling slider for every car. What I mean by that is that every car should have the ability to go to 100% grip, 100% drift, or anything in between. As a grip racer, this is definitely something I want to see, because there's so many cars I want to try out in a grip setting, but they only go to like 20% grip, for example. And don't get me wrong, I can obviously try them out with drift handling, but it would be cool to be able to try them out in full grip mode. Okay, so the next point I want to talk about is the wrap editor and the problems that I, and I'm sure many others, have with the wrap editor. I will say that the wrap editor itself is fine. Like, it could be better, of course. I mean, just looking at open world games, both Forza and The Crew have a much better wrap editor, but Unbound is just fine. The issues I have with it are more related to wrap slots. Firstly, the number of wrap slots is just dumb. I mean, I can only have 100 wrap slots, yet there's well over 150 cars in the game. So if I wanted to collect every car in the game, I wouldn't even be able to simply change the colour of some of them. Which brings me on to my second issue. And it's that simply changing the colour of my car takes up a whole wrap slot. Like, I've maxed out my wrap slots, and almost half of them are me simply changing the colour of my car. It's just stupid. I really don't think changing the colour should warrant taking up a whole wrap slot, especially when you're so limited with the amount of slots available. Instead, it should only take up a slot when you go to add a decal. Another thing that really annoys me when it comes to taking up wrap slots is when you're copying a wrap onto a duplicate car. That might sound confusing, so let me give you an example. Here I have the Mitsubishi Lancer Evo 9. Now, this is one of my favourite cars, so of course I've got 4 of them across multiple classes. Now, I've created a wrap for the Evo that I actually really like, and I want to apply it to all 4 of my Evos, so I did. But guess what? That's taken 4 of my slots. Like, how does that even make sense? The exact same wrap on the exact same car, yet it takes an extra 3 slots. It's, again, so stupid, and it just shouldn't be like that in my opinion. And the thing is, all these things have been a problem since 2015, and they haven't gotten much better, if at all, since then. I think for the next game, they really need to rethink how the wrap editor works on that side of things. Alright then, on to the next point, crash cams. Do I even need to say anything else? Nah, I'm kidding. But I did recently watch a video by fellow content creator Crown Sins regarding crash cams, and I agree with everything he said in that video. Now, without repeating what he said, I am going to touch on some things he mentioned and show some comparisons between Heat and Unbound. So one of the things he said in his video was that crash cams, or the lack of rather, were better in Heat, and I've got to say I agree with him. In fact, the lack of crash cams in Need for Speed Heat definitely made for a better driving experience in my opinion. Like, I'm already getting punished enough by not only losing a lot of speed by hitting the traffic, but also by crashing my car, and now I've got to watch my car barrel roll and flip several times as if it's auditioning for the next Fast and Furious. Come on now, that's just silly. And on top of that, I think crash cams can make you not only ruin your race, but also ruin the race of others as well. For example, let's say I'm in first and then I crash into traffic. I've already ruined my own race, but then once you respawn, you're going to have the other racers behind you that might crash into you or go off track as they're trying to avoid your car that's just respawned. Whereas that wouldn't have happened in Need for Speed Heat thanks to the lack of crash cams. Another thing Crown mentioned was that when you're in free roam and you crash, it lets you drive away no problem, but in a race it fully resets you, and this was always something that drove me crazy, and I'm about to show you a few clips that explain why. So if we watch this clip of me in free roam, I intentionally crashed into this oncoming traffic, and because I was still on my wheels and in motion, the game didn't fully reset me. Instead, it maintained my speed and I was able to continue driving. Now let's compare that with these clips of me in a race where I crashed, and as you can see after the crash, my car is clearly stable and on its wheels, yet the game still resets me. Like, come on man, there's literally no reason to reset me in these situations at all. It's just so unnecessary. The last thing I'm going to talk about that Crown mentioned is the inconsistency of crash cams. Like, there's been instances where I'll be driving upwards of 150 miles an hour and crash into an oncoming car head on and still get no crash cam. Yet in another instance, I could be driving a little over 100 miles an hour or even less than that, crash into a car and get the most dramatic crash cam of all time. Like, there's no consistency whatsoever. So I definitely agree with Crown in regards to returning to Heat's way of dealing with crashes and its lack of crash cams for the next game. Also, shout out to Crown Sins, man, brilliant content creator. If you're not already subbed to him, he's not too far off 2k, so I'll leave his link in the description so you can check him out. Alright, so the next thing I want to discuss is to do with the racing system. Now, I'm actually a massive fan of the playlist system in the game, but I do think that you should be able to also play races separately. You might think I'm nitpicking with this one, and honestly, I probably am a little bit, but I want you to hear me out on this one as well. Right, so let's say for example, one of my favourite tracks is Off the Grid. First of all, this track is only available in two classes, A and S, which is another issue in of itself that I'll touch on later. Second of all, in each of those playlists, it's the final track. So if I wanted to only play that track, I've got to do two other races just to get onto my favourite track. And thirdly, it's only available in two classes. Now personally, I think you should be able to do playlists in whatever class you want, rather than having class locked playlists. And I don't even think that's a hot take at all. I mean, let's take it back to Off the Grid as an example. Let's say I wanted to race that track in my fully upgraded Ferrari FXXK Evo. I should be able to do that. Like, I should be able to do whichever race I want in whichever car I want. Now for me, if the playlist system is going to stick around in the next game, there's a couple of changes that I'd like to see. Firstly, give players the option to select and start races separately, so that they can choose whether they want to start the playlist or just one of the races in the playlist. And secondly, let players choose what class they do a playlist in. Like, rather than having class locked playlists, they could just have a bunch of playlists of different event types and then let the players change the class before they start it. I think this would give players so much more variety in the game, and these two changes would give players a lot more freedom to play the game how they want to play it, whilst not changing the core system too drastically. Okay, so what I want to talk about next is the photo mode and its severe lack of features. Looking at the photo mode in Unbound, it might be the most bare bones photo mode in any racing game, probably even any game in general. Now on one hand, I can slightly see why they put out a photo mode with such a lack of features, because the game already looks amazing anyway, so the way they might see it, you wouldn't really need to make adjustments, at least in terms of filters. But even filters aside, there's just so many features lacking that were there in previous games, even going back to 2015 and Payback. I mean, look at the photo mode from 2015 and look at all the adjustments you could make to get the perfect picture. Just so many options, at least in comparison to Unbound, which, as mentioned earlier, is very bare bones. It has barely anything. I really want to know the reason why the photo mode is so lacking in features, because if we go back to the previous game, Need for Speed Heat, it had pretty much all the features that 2015 and Payback had. But Unbound is just so stripped back. It's actually quite sad. I know at the start of the video, I said I wasn't going to suggest anything that needed a crazy overhaul. But I think for the next Need for Speed, the photo mode definitely needs a massive overhaul. Like, I'm not even talking Gran Turismo levels, because that would probably be a bit of an unrealistic expectation. But if we're talking open world, the Crew Motorfest photo mode is crazy good. There's so many features and adjustments you can make. You know, you can adjust the amount of damage on your car. For example, if you wanted a picture showing your car's battle scars from an intense race, you can change the weather, the time of day, add motion blur, and so much more. It's just levels above Unbound's photo mode. So yeah, next Need for Speed game, we need an overhaul of the photo mode. Alright, I know this video's gone on for a while, so just a couple more things to go. The next thing on my list that I want to talk about is not letting us start playlists solo. And no, I don't mean that you can start playlists on your own, but I mean being able to start a playlist straight away without the need to invite anyone. Now, if you remember, Need for Speed Heat had this feature, and it let us race on our own immediately. Well, kind of. There were AI races on the track, but they weren't really much of a problem. Now again, you might think I'm nitpicking with this one, but please hear me out. So I can totally see why they took that option away. You know, they want to encourage player engagement and interaction. But the thing is, players do just want to race on their own sometimes. Like, take this clip here for example. This player clearly wanted to race on their own, because every time someone would join, they'd leave and start it up again. And this is what I mean by just letting us start a playlist solo, because there are people that just want to race alone with no distractions, whether that's because they want to test out a car on a new track, or maybe they're trying to beat their friend's time. Whatever the reason, there are always going to be people who want to race on their own with no distractions, and they should have the option to do that. So although I can see why they've taken that option away, I think for the next game they should definitely add it back. Speaking of trying to beat their friends' time, that's actually a great segue into my last point, which is leaderboards. Now, I don't quite see why they took away the leaderboards, because they had them in Need for Speed Heat and even 2015, but they need to bring them back. They were a great way to see how you compare to your friends. I remember me and my friends used to constantly compete on different drift tracks to see who could get the highest scores, and it was so much fun, and to be honest, I really miss that competitive spark. I think bringing back leaderboards would improve player engagement as well. You know, you could have global leaderboards, platform specific leaderboards, and then friends leaderboards, and you can really see how you stack up against the rest of the community. Like I mentioned, leaderboards were a thing back in 2015 and Need for Speed Heat, and I really think they should make a return in the next game. Right, I think that's everything. If you've made it this far and you're still watching, I just want to say thank you for sticking around and hearing everything I have to say. On that note, I do want to pose some questions to you guys. What are your thoughts on anything that I said and some of the proposed changes that I mentioned? Is there anything I discussed in the video that you disagreed with, and if so, what was it and why? Whatever your thoughts, I'd love to hear them in the comments down below, and if you have any feedback for me, drop that in the comments too. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it was a long one, so if you did make it to the end, again, I want to say a big thank you. If you did enjoy it, please leave a like, it's much appreciated. And if you do enjoy my content, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.